Good day, South Africans. My name is Bicky Mthombeni. I come to you representing an organization which is a non-profit organization in South Africa called SACRA, South African Clinical Research Association. We advocate for the conduct of medical research within South Africa. Today is the 20th of May, which is the International Clinical Trials Day. In light of everything that is happening in the world, we saw it fit that we speak to you about South Africa leading the way in medicine development. Firstly, I would like to take you through the background of medicine development, and I will start with some personal stories that makes me very passionate and made me become an advocate for clinical trials in South Africa. When I grew up, my father was diabetic and he had type 1 diabetes, and he needed to take insulin daily. At the beginning, in the early 90s, when he used to take insulin, he needed to use a syringe 2 times a day to inject the insulin into his body. And he will do that, obviously, after or before each and every meal, and we will be watching as he does that. And it was not very helpful. As children, we were not very welcoming of that. But through research and development, at this very moment, if a patient is diabetic and they need to use insulin, they will receive what we call an insulin pen in South Africa. Some patients are able to find treatments such as an insulin pump or even an insulin patch, which you can just put into your arm, for example, and it will regulate the dispensing of insulin into your body. Through research, we are able to improve clinical response. We're able to also produce practical equipments that can deliver medicine much better and also improve the health economics. I also want to take you through the evolution of HIV treatment. I think HIV is quite something that is very close to many of us, because many of us, we know someone that is infected and we are all affected by HIV. In the early 1980s, when it was still known as AIDS, and it was a pandemic which just reached in the world, everyone was confused. Many people didn't know how this was going to end for the human race. Through that, many researchers came into parties, many countries, many organizations, they came together to start researching AIDS, to the point where they were able to identify it as HIV. Following which, research continued, and we were looking at treatment, we were looking at diagnostic. Only in 1984, we were able to find the first HIV diagnostic test. And at least at that moment, we were able to diagnose the people that were HIV positive and those that were negative. Research continued. In 1987, the first treatment was registered and approved to be used in people that were infected with HIV. The molecule was called AZT. And this treatment was initially researched for cancer in 1964, but it didn't work for the particular cancer. Following which, because we never stop as researchers, we continue to look for better treatment that can improve people's life. AZT also had its challenges because it didn't reduce the viral load or increase the CD4 count as much as we would have wanted. Research continued to a point where later on we were able to find 3 different treatments. The DDR, you can look them up, the 3TC and the D14. These treatment initially were taken individually. And if you recall, if you were there at that particular time, there were a lot of side effects. People had puffy faces, people were developing breast or were developing other things that they shouldn't be developing. And those kind of activities, we call them side effects. Then that's when the research community still came together and continued to find a better solution, where they advanced to bringing together the 3 combination of therapy, which was the DDTI and 3TC, and through some research, some were actually even removed from the treatment parameters. At that particular point where they find that the combination therapy worked, a patient needed to take 3 treatment groups. You can see here in this indicated slide, a patient needed to take at least 4 pills from here, 3 from here, and 3 from here. And this was a lot of treatment that one person had to take at a time. And we continued with research. Research didn't stop, although people were getting better from this combination therapy. Research didn't stop, it continued. And 35 years later, a novel outcome of research came out where we are able to give HIV-infected patients one pill. In South Africa now, many patients, even in public practice, they receive the one pill, which has improved the life of the people, and it has improved the outcomes of the lives of the people. And it is important to know that further research continues to look for vaccine, because a person's body is very complicated. Our physiology, our genetic makeup is very complicated. So it is not easy, basically, to fight the HIV. At this moment, this is the treatment that is available. And I also want to reflect on some plant treatment. I think it is very important at this time to also touch on it when we are faced with COVID-19, and there are many available talks around the world on how to use traditional medicine for treatment. Just to reflect, although the standards that we follow to develop medicine are international standards that are followed throughout the world, there are some plant species that have led to medicine that we are currently using. The first bullet point here, this species here that has been found in 2017, which is derived from Justicia willow leaves. It was discovered in 2017, and it was extracted from so many plants to the point where they have found that it has some effects against HIV virus. And research continues to find out if this particular extract can further be used for treatment of HIV. I'll give an example of metformin. Metformin, we also know it as glucophage, is the first-line treatment for management of type 2 diabetes. Most patients that are taking type 2, are on a type 2 diabetic, they are actually started on metformin. Metformin was also taken from a plant extract that was a traditional herbal medicine in Europe, and it was developed in 1980. And it was registered sometimes later. So plant-based extracts can also become effective treatment that can be registered and be used worldwide. I want to take you through the drug development value chain. So this is what we do daily. We look at ways in which we can take a certain molecule, could be a plant extract, from the plant to the pharmacy. This can apply for medicines that we know as vaccines, that we know as biologicals, and also traditional medicine. So this is the basic step of drug development. I know we call it drug, that is the term that we use commonly in the research environment, but that is basically mean medicine. So the steps that we take from when a particular molecule is known, or from the particular time when we know a drug or a suspected drug or a suspected combination of molecule, we start at the laboratory. So at the laboratory, in different worlds, they will be currently busy identifying different extracts, different molecules that they work on them. And this process can take 2 to 5 years for them to be able to map that kind of molecule and be able to see how it works and what is the component of that particular molecule. And if that step is successful, that can take 2 to 5 years. If that step is successful, then all data that is gathered during this time is compiled together, and it goes through different aspects that look at that particular package, and then they are able to assess and say this can get a green light to move to the next step. The next step, we call it preclinical testing. Preclinical testing happens in animals. So there are animals that are particularly designed for research. I'll give you an example of some rats, which is called Wistar albino rats. Those kind of rats, we usually use them to actually do preclinical testing. So during that time, we'll assess how the rat will react, how its body functions will be affected. For example, if there will be liver toxicity, how toxic is that particular drug that we're trying to check if it works or if it doesn't work. Through that time, we will collect all the data that comes, how it works, where it works, what it affected. Did the rat go blind? Did the rat grow enough vision if it's a vision study? From that particular information, we collect that information, we put it together, it goes through some regulatory assessment, it goes through different experts committee that will then give it a green light to move to the next phase, which is clinical trials. Clinical trials can take about 5 years to 7 years. It is important to note that during clinical trials, there are different phases of clinical trial. Firstly, we'll start at phase 1. The phase 1 are called first in human. So before we can actually expose many people into the drug, we will then have to conduct what we call phase 1. Phase 1 are conducted in highly controlled facility. It's not just any research center that does phase 1. So at that particular moment, these volunteers will be recruited to come through to the phase 1, and the particular medicine will be tested following standards that I will cover in the next fold. After phase 1, which is usually a few people that participate in, we gather data, we move to phase 2, and in phase 2, we look at the dose. That's why you find that you need to know how to take your medication. That's where at phase 2, we discover, should the drug be used as an injection? Should it be used as a pill? That is where the work actually happens. And further to that, we also do what we call phase 3. Phase 3 are your safety and efficacy study. This, we want to know how safe is this molecule in general population. So this phase 3 will usually be multinational, multi-centered, and it will have so many people so that we are able to see in a broad spectrum of the people with different diseases, how does that particular drug that we're working on interact with the person's body. And we will collect the data still, which we then will compile together and submit to different regulatory authority before they can grant approval for that particular drug to be available at the pharmacy or also at your hospital. And once that drug is available, everyone can access it. At that particular moment, we will know that this drug has been tested through different standards that are obviously acceptable internationally. This applies also for vaccine. I know currently there's a lot of discussion, and there's a lot of discussion that states that the vaccine for COVID may be available in 18 months. That it is true. However, it needs a lot of people to come together and change the way things are being done. But currently, this is the process for drug development, including the vaccines. So now, the main important aspect is the clinical trials, because this is the part that recently has created a lot of discussion. We can see in different social media platforms, also in South Africa and all around Africa, that the clinical trials, the medical research that is conducted in human participants is busy, available for everyone to actually comment about. So I will take you through what we do as people that work in the clinical trials space. What are clinical trials? These are medical research are conducted in human participants. The participant volunteer to participate in clinical trial. They are done to answer to a specific medical need. So if you were to look at the current medical need, which is obviously to treat COVID-19, we need to ensure that that particular research that we do, it's responsive to the health needs of communities. So it's the research related to COVID-19, a health need for South African community, as the research relating to diabetes, responsive to the health need of South African communities. Those are the kind of things that we need to look at. And the one thing that I also need to clarify this particular point, clinical research or medical research is not just done by international companies in different countries. It is done also in the countries. We can also conduct our own research to identify new treatment, new medical devices, to improve the current treatment, to generate knowledge, to compare the current treatment, and obviously to improve the healthcare of the community, and the community being ourselves. So we need to ensure that whatever research that we participate on, we stand to benefit from the knowledge, the practices, and the interventions that result from that particular research. Research should address local and continental issues while maintaining global perspectives. So when we do clinical research, we follow a certain code of ethics, code of standards, which are called good clinical practice. As I talk about good clinical practice, I want you to reflect in your area of expertise. If you are a lawyer, if you are an accountant, if you are an engineer, and you're doing project management, you also need to comply to certain standards. You need to comply to the ISO standards, for example. What kind of standards do you need to comply to in your area of expertise? It's the same as when we do clinical trials. We have international standards and process and ethical principles that we need to follow. And it is followed by our researchers throughout that conduct research. And it ensures patient safety. It ensures that we collect quality data, because without the data, we have no evidence of how the drug works. And if we do not have international agreed code of ethics for human research studies, we are not able to protect the people that participate in research. And we may produce unsafe medication. So the aim is to ensure development of highly quality knowledge that may benefit future generations. So when we conduct research, it is not particularly for us. It's basically for the future generation. We need to be very clear of that. So these are the core principles of good clinical practice. I will not touch on all of them, but this information is available in the net. We will not do any research where the risk is higher than the benefits. There has to be a benefit risk assessment that is done to ensure that we are doing research that will be beneficial at the end of the day. And we need to ensure that the rights and safety of the participants that are most concerned are protected. The protocols that we follow, they go through different regulatory and research ethics committee approval, which I will give an example of. And this research are done by qualified medical practitioners. In South Africa, we have about 1,500 research sites, which are headed by different teams, which we call investigators. These are medical doctors, these are specialists that are well trained, that have the skills and the expertise to actually conduct that research. And these are the doctors that also treat some of the participants, and they ensure that before any participant is enrolled in a research study, they give voluntary informed consent. It is very important to know that informed consent has to be voluntary, and the patients that are enrolled in the trials, they need to be informed of the risk and the benefits of the particular research that they are participating in. So this is the most interesting part of this talk today about South Africa. Where do we stand as South Africans when it comes to clinical research? Where do we stand as South Africans based on the information that I've just given now, that shows the importance of medical research, that shows that there are legal frameworks and there are standards that we follow to ensure that we conduct research, whether it's international research or local research. So I'll take you through some brief information about what is happening in South Africa. So in South Africa, we have a regulatory body, we have ethical principles that we follow, we have the government that we need to follow according to the laws that are put together in the country. So we have the Act 101 of 1965 that we follow in South Africa that basically gives the basic guidelines of what research should be done and how it should be done and what statutory bodies must be available in order for research to take place in the country. So we have gatekeepers. I do not think at this moment in South Africa there is any researcher that can come through into South Africa and conduct research without the approval of SAPRA. That is not acceptable in South Africa. And if any research happens without the legal approval of SAPRA, that research is illegal. So what happens is that for each and every study that comes through, SAPRA needs to be informed. And SAPRA has committees of technical experts that include highly experienced people that evaluate each and every protocol that comes into South Africa, and then they grant approval based on the need of our country, based on the risk-based profile, based on the scientific objective of the particular protocol. In addition to that, we also have the Research Ethics Committee. The Research Ethics Committee, through the leadership of National Health Research Ethics Committees. In South Africa, we have 3 private research ethics, and we have institutional review boards in each and every university in South Africa that is participating in research. And through those bodies that are run by the experts, they are able to evaluate the ethics of that particular research, and they weigh the benefits of that research, and they ensure that the participants that participate are not compromised in any way by a researcher who is coming from an international platform or who is coming from the local platform. Whether the research is international or local, it undergoes the same standards. And when the research is conducted at a research site, international standards are followed, and we also have our own SA GCP guidelines. You can also look it up if you would like to see that. So this is now the interesting part of research. If you look at this map, it's taken from a database called clinicaltrials.gov. If you would like to also check the number of trials that we do in South Africa, we also have our own South African National Clinical Trials Registry. You can look it up, and you will see that overall, globally, we are participating. This data was taken early in May, 2,776 trials that have been registered in South Africa. And based on this data, and which I will break down in the next slide, we're participating on less than 1.5% of global trials. If you look at this, you may see that in Africa, we're basically the second following Egypt, and you can see that there's other African countries that are also participating in different research. And I think this map shows you the different countries, what is happening in China, what is happening in the United States with the number of clinical trials that are being conducted, what is happening in Europe with the number of clinical trials that are being conducted. And throughout that, you can see the contribution of Africa when it comes to global research. These are the top 20 countries. This data is from a system called TrialTrove, and you can see there the United States has as much this number of clinical trials using the TrialTrove database. And you look at China there, you can look at India, they have that number 11,356. And if you go down, you look at Mexico, you look at Poland, that is 9,292. Going back to South Africa, we're sitting at about 2,000 clinical trials, which means we are very much far from the bottom of the list. And you can see here also there's non-African country that is listed here. I also extracted this that shows the research that is conducted in natural products. And you will understand why Chinese medicines are so much available in many other platforms. There is much more research that is being done in China using natural products, and India. They are well known for their traditional medicines, and there are so many other countries that are actually participating in that sphere of natural products. In Egypt, at least we can see there it is representing Africa. So I also want to just talk a little bit about traditional medicine development in South Africa. This slide was taken from a presentation that was done at Free State Research Day in November 2019. The slide basically highlights how biodiverse is South Africa. We have extensive knowledge on indigenous knowledge system. We have about 30,000 indigenous plant species, and about 4,000 are of medicinal plants. Globally, there's 350,000 plant species, which means in South Africa alone, we constitute more than 10% of global plant species. The issue is, how do we translate this medicinal product into registered treatment? How do we ensure that we conduct research following the international available standards which require safety and efficacy and ensuring quality of this medicinal product? We need to remember that research helps us to produce proven and documented risk-benefit profile of the use of any medication, including traditional medicines. I also want to touch something that is very critical, which is generic medicine in South Africa. These are medicines that are developed as copies of original medicine to produce or provide affordable healthcare for developing and developed countries. There are many pharmaceutical companies that are specializing in making generic medicine. Still, even when generic medicines are made, we have strict rules that should ensure that the copies of medicine that are developed as generics, they undergo a certain level of quality and safety requirement, which will make them the same as the original molecule. This is called bioequivalence study. So we need to know that in South Africa has the only research center on the African continent which is qualified by the World Health Organization to conduct bioequivalence studies. And the studies that are conducted in South Africa are used to produce registration for many countries globally. So this is one important aspect, especially at this time. It's not possible to talk about research and not include COVID-19 trials. So I looked up on one of the databases that I have access to, which is called TrialTrove, and you will see that worldwide there's currently 338 trials that have been registered. So these are the 20 registered, the top 20 countries with those numbers of registered trials. So you can see again, the United States has the majority of the trial, and then China, they have 30, Russia 14, Canada, you can see there, and I don't think we have any South African country here. We have Colombia, Sweden, India, but we don't have any of the African countries. So where is the African countries? Which research are we doing? Are we not registering the research as we're supposed to do, as it is required by World Health Organization? Because we need to ensure that even research that is done and it's locally funded, it's also registered in the different database as per requirements. So in South Africa, we need to participate in this research in relation to COVID-19. As I've indicated, we do research to respond to the medical needs of our community. So research remains crucial. We need to reduce mortality from COVID-19. We need to reduce hospital stay. We need to reduce transmission of virus. We also need to contribute to the development of vaccine. So there are few trials that we also know that South Africa will be participating on, and some of them are already registered in the database. We know the Solidarity trial. I will talk about the Solidarity trial later, and the BCG vaccination for healthcare workers in COVID-19 pandemic, a study which is being run by Task Applied Science, and I'll also talk about it later. And we also found in the database the chloroquine outpatient treatment study, which is being run by and sponsored by the University of Cape Town. So you can see that even the local university can be sponsors of different clinical trials. And there's this trial that is called Crown Coronation. So this is another trial that we are looking at participating on in South Africa. Many data may still be pending to be updated in the different databases for consolidation into the formal global ones. Here, I would like to highlight to you the risk of less activity in research and development, and I call it the missing African. The reason I call it the missing African is that we are part of the community. We are part of the globe. We are connected to the globe. We cannot look at ourselves differently. So according to the FDA snapshot in 2017, FDA is the Food and Drug Food and Drug of America snapshot of 2016, there was less than 2% of data which was representing African participant, which was South African participant, which contributed to drugs that were registered in 2016. What this means is that African people were represented by less than 2% of participants. So how does that benefit us? Because this drug in later space, even if maybe they are not registered now in South Africa, they will be registered in South Africa because it is a global response process. If these drugs become available and they were not tested in African population, which we know that it has genetic differences from other population. And you've seen in the breakdown that I showed you of the different countries, you've seen how India is represented, how Japan is represented, how China is represented, and obviously the European countries are represented. And we need to understand how that necessarily have some impact on generalization of the data. We've seen in the past that genetic differences does impact the efficacy and safety of medicine. This was seen in management of some diseases, which includes hypertension. For example, the use of ACE inhibitors as single treatment does not work properly in African communities. We need to use it in combination for it to work better. So those are kind of things that we need to think about as research comes into our country, and as ourselves, as researchers that are empowered as South African to come up with our own protocol and develop our own researchers, how do we ensure that we have representation of African population in the research that we do? Additionally, if we do not participate or if we are not active in medical research, our knowledge will obviously decline, or we will not have sufficient information to inform policy and practice. If a drug, for example, it's not tested in South Africa, which means we will not necessarily have the knowledge and actually the practice to ensure that once it's available in the market, we know how to implement it. This is very important that we increase the generation of human capital and research skills that is needed. And these research skills, as we continue, it will help us to advance in development of other African traditional medicine. And it also has an economic impact. So we're missing out on the economic impact of basically having our own locally produced indigenous medicine. It delays development. So it is very important. And how can South Africa lead the way in medicine development? Many of this is what we're currently doing. We look at training. Training, I will give an example on medical training. I also studied my basic degree in a medical institution. And I can reflect to you that I've been in many discussions with some of my friends that are also medical doctors, and they are not much taught about medicine development. I was also not taught about medicine development while I was working in the science field. So it is very important that we look at our training programs and see how those programs can also incorporate medicine's development. And we need to continue with international and obviously local collaboration. There's lots of companies in South Africa and there's lots of organizations that are leading in international partnerships, that are also leading in research, including your organization like the Medical Research Council, which is a South African organization that is leading when it comes to medical research. So those are the kind of partnerships that we need to continue and support. Additionally, how do we invest in R&D? How much do we invest in R&D? How do we lead the development as South Africa? Which part, I'll give an example now when we're talking about the breakdown of the funds that we have. I have listened to the budget speech, and I know this may not be very nice, but I cannot recall where there was a breakdown to say this much will go into the research and development when it comes to COVID. So it is very important that even that information is made publicly available to the people, and we need to participate. The reason why we need to participate is because sometimes it's not like participate means participate only in international clinical trials, for example. participate in local clinical trials, get to know what is happening in your community. We need to look at the system integration. We need to look at the systems that we have when it comes to medical research, and how do we integrate them? How do we improve the systems that we have? Who do we need to actually work together with us to improve this system? And this is another point that I will mention. We need to reduce bureaucracy. There is a lot of red tape in how we do things, and there are ways in which we can improve this, and we are working together and we are collaborating to actually improve this. Global trends. South Africa is a global community. We are all interconnected. We connected to the world. We need to face what is happening in the global trends. What kind of research is moving globally? So how do we look at our regulations and see how we can incorporate the trends that are happening to ensure that we do not lag behind? Additionally, we need support and understanding. We need community engagement. Why we need support and understanding? Why do we need community engagement? And who is the community that we need? The community, it's ourselves, it's me and you, because we are the research participants. Because if we do not participate, we will not be able to generate data that we need. And at the end of the day, who is the patient? I think I love the statement of who is the patient, because when we talk through this presentation, we usually remove the patient out of ourselves. But if you think about it, we are all patients, especially when you know that at any given point or at any time in your life, you have taken medication. It doesn't have to be a chronic medication. The reason that you're taking Panado and you know Panado is effective is because someone participated in research and they contributed in research and they made sure that data is generated to ensure that that particular Panado is available in the pharmacy. So we need to increase community engagement, and we need to ask the right question, and we need to do research and identify what are the key stakeholders in South Africa. Who are the leaders in South Africa when it comes to this particular aspect of research? What kind of information do we need to know? We need to stop negative self-talk. We need to stop looking down on ourselves, because as a country, we have platforms, we have systems, we have regulatory bodies, we have ethical bodies, we have medically qualified researchers, we have research companies that are operating within South Africa, and many of them are South African and are working all together to ensure that we win the battle when it comes to development of medicine. So I think it's all up to us to also become leaders in how we speak about ourselves, because it does impact on our image as South African. We need to look at ourselves with confidence, knowing very well that we have all that we need to be able to stand at this time. So I would also like to share with you about the BCG vaccination trial that is being conducted in Cape Town currently. It's ongoing and it's being run by Task Applied Sciences. There's so many information that is available in the net, and I'll also make this YouTube video available here for you. With this vaccine, which it's a great example of good collaboration within the country, the Task company was able to secure approval. This is a company that has been started in Cape Town, and it's being run in Cape Town, and they have a research center which is doing multiple clinical trials. So they have started a study which will be looking at healthcare workers, and it will be testing the BCG vaccine trial, vaccine, which has been used for vaccination against TB for many years. So it will be great for us to follow this. Remember, research is done to prove if it works or if it doesn't work. Having this vaccination program happening, we will only know at the end if it worked or if it doesn't work. Because what we do during research, we will have two different groups. One will be exposed to the vaccine, the other will be called a comparator. And through the processes that we follow, we are able to look at the data at the end and see which one worked. So we're looking forward to see the outcome of this study. I also like to share with you the latest video that has been posted just this week, which was shared by Dr. Zwelin Kize, and it was posted #listen to the experts, and it has Prof. Rees on it. So this is a very important call for us as South Africans. let's listen to what the experts are saying. In South Africa, we have lots of expertise within South Africa. We have lots of organization within South Africa that is running clinical trials. So reach out to them if you are confused so that we can learn more about research and how we can contribute. At this very moment, I would like to share the sad news that there is no other way to develop medicine than to actually conduct medical research the way we are doing. So if you'd like to know more about us, from SACRA, I highlighted, which is South African Clinical Research Association. There is our contact details, and we advocate for clinical trials. Thank you for listening.